Being able to student teach in Shanghai, China was one of the most amazing experiences I've had so far as an educator and also personally. But what I'd like to focus on right now is some of my experiences within the school. I was a student teacher at the Livingston American School in Shanghai, China, and I just learned so much about the different kinds of students and also about the way the structure of education can be different. The biggest thing I learned is you need to be flexible because everything's a little bit different, but that doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Usually there's a reason things are done a little bit differently. It was kind of daunting. I walked in on the very first day. The principal was wonderful and greeted me so nicely and then presented me with this. This whole thing is the staff handbook. So it's a little bit intimidating, but I have to say that there is a form for every possible situation you could ever imagine. The Livingston American School was a beautiful, sprawling kind of compound with different buildings. The main school is actually painted kind of a pinkish color and has 6 floors. So I got a lot of exercise doing the stairs all day. The rooms were smaller because class sizes were a little bit smaller. I had 2 different host teachers because they're on an A day and a B day schedule that rotates. I was with an English teacher who also taught English as a second language, so I worked with those classes. And then on the alternating day, I was with the Spanish teacher, but it's okay. I have a Spanish background, and I really enjoyed those days as well. There's some really neat things that school does that I thought were interesting. For example, students are divided up into houses. If you have any experience with the Harry Potter universe, it's very similar to that. They have the overall mascot of the Wildcats, but students are divided into different houses, such as I was a red lynx, there were black lions, there were silver snow leopards. And those go across the different grades and create nice little communities that are used to create mentor relationships between students, but are also used for competitions instead of the traditional juniors versus the seniors competition. We had a jogathon, and it was the different houses competing to raise money for a charity. The school was very much like a family, which I thought was really lovely. The relationship between teachers and the administration and the students. For example, it was a personal choice, but many of the teachers went by their first name. My students referred to me as Miss Amy, and were always very friendly and wanted to talk and share about their lives and share what books they were reading, or even snacks. They would share some that they had with me or tell me that there was something I really needed to try. Blueberry Pocky, by the way, is really wonderful. Students were incredibly respectful. I can think of one afternoon, our lunchroom was very, very crowded, a small space for a lot of students, and a student actually stood up and offered me his chair so I could sit down and eat lunch. There's a very high level of consideration and respect for educators in that culture. Teachers are considered very important. This school is very active and had a lot of amazing extra opportunities, after-school tutoring, clubs, different programs to share culture. The very first week I was there was a large community event inviting parents and others to experience American-style Halloween. Really able to be involved in a little bit of everything. I also helped with the preschool Christmas program. And for student council, I actually chaperoned one of their movie nights and helped them set up and had some really great conversations with those students comparing the kinds of events and things to high school experiences in the United States, which I had a little background on. And these were students from all over, from Spain, from England, from China, from Taiwan, from Korea. I also gained some interesting experience working with support staff at the school. The school has several translators. I was able to utilize their assistance, having some discussions with parents. At one point, one of my ESL students was ill and we went to the nurse. One afternoon, I had a really excellent, productive conversation with one of my classes about geography and the language of a location, actually, because we had read a story and it was based in Chicago. And one of my students asked me, well, can you drive there from LA? They knew the names of large cities, but not smaller places. So I was able to pull out a map and point and say, I'm from Michigan, I'm from right here, and talk a little bit about distance and how it's sometimes common to explain that in time and say, I'm actually 3 hours away from there, which is a little bit different. And then we talked about metric versus English measure, and it was just a really nice little cultural conversation we were able to. I did a little research and I took a cooking class so I could actually make xiaolongbao, my very favorite soup dumplings. That's one of the other things. My roommates and I loved to go out to dinner and practice our language and also experience the food. There's also really excellent street food. And I practiced my language with the food vendor that was always on the corner outside of our apartment. Some really tasty things. Like, I still in the United States now, whenever I can find it, love to get bubble tea. I also tried to blog while I was in China. It was a new experience for me. I'm not incredibly tech savvy. I'm much better now than I was at the time, though. And it was a little hit or miss. Some of it because the quality of the internet in China is very different. It's very slow. But I gave it a shot. If you want to look at an example, it's still available. I would recommend, though, definitely trying to document your experience in some way so you can do some reflection later. I also shared this with my students in the United States so they could kind of follow along and feel connected to the experience and share some of that. Share your experience in your future classroom with your students. You might be the window to the world for them and motivate them to experience culture in a new way. I was able to connect with some ESL students who are actually originally from France, but traveled because their parents are involved in international business. And when I introduced myself and said I had spent some time in Shanghai, they got so excited. It was a brother and sister, and they had lived in Shanghai for 2 years, and it was a really valuable, excellent connection that we were able to make. Also, encourage others. Once you get back, share your experience. That's what I'm trying to do right now. I want everyone to at least be aware of this opportunity and this excellent experience to benefit themselves as a future educator and also for their future students. Share with the Study Abroad office, help out with programs. Just let's all do our part.